Hello and welcome. Tonight we've got a special guest for you. My name is Chamchi Gimbap. I am the political fish, and I'm here with Old School Anarchist.
Hello there.
It's good to have you on at last.
Yeah, man.
Would you like to introduce yourself and how we met, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so Old School Anarchist is what I go by. My YouTube channel is the Bonnet Gang. So basically, I've been in and out of sort of politics and activism and that for maybe just over a decade now. Came up through the punk scene and that, and now I'm just mainly doing sort of student politics and stuff like that. And wanted to get onto the YouTube scene a little bit because information and society's changing and all that kind of stuff. So it's a new realm of political discourse, and we met through Captain Switzerland's channel.
Excellent.
Give him a little plug.
Big up Captain Swiss.
Yeah, one of my friends in real life, and you invited me on, and I'm happy to be here. So yeah, that's pretty much me.
Yeah, I've got to be honest. Like, it must be. I've seen some like anarchists online, like Bad Mouse Productions and that kind of stuff. That I thought his videos were wicked, but
he's a good guy.
Yeah, he does a lot of the history and stuff. But I'm quite unclear of what it's all about now. So I wondered if we dive straight in, if you could put it in a nutshell for me, what it's all about.
Well, anarchism, I guess you can boil it down to a political philosophy that advocates for self-governed societies, based on sort of like a horizontal power structure, not necessarily a power structure. Well, yeah, a horizontal power structure, but it's completely voluntary is the idea. Voluntary associations of people working together for like mutual aid. Do you know what I mean? Cooperation and all that kind of stuff, and that's kind of the cornerstone of it. But obviously, if you've watched a bit of Bad Mouse and what have you, there is a lot of history behind anarchism, and it goes back to like the 1800s. We're talking, and some people say it can go further back to like primitive communism in a sense, and all of this stuff. But the overall political sort of thought and what have you, it started with stuff like the Paris Commune and all of that, and there's been revolutions, and because we are jumping right into the deep end, and I kind of see it as there's two interests at play in society. There's all of us, and then there is the ruling classes, Marxist.
The bourgeois.
Yeah,
bourgeoisie.
Yeah. And one of my main things that I like to view politics as is the mediation of class interests, basically. So you can see throughout history that there has been what Marx termed the class struggle. All, like I said, something along the lines of like all hetero societies are the history of class struggle, or something along them lines. I'm probably butchering Marx there, but
I'm sure he wouldn't mind.
No, probably not. No, and so the anarchist movement has grown up alongside these struggles, and grown up alongside theories of communism and all that kind of good stuff, and we just find ourselves now in at least in an era of politics where the discourse is very limited, in my opinion. Like there's no, it's when you talk about politics and what have you, it's mostly, especially in the UK where we're both from, it's you don't get much choice in your general election, and the two main parties are neoliberal, and nobody's really talking about the Overton window is very slim in terms of political discourse. But if you look at history, there is a wide array of political theory and philosophy and stuff like that. And if, in my opinion, obviously, you can look at anarchism, and it is, at least it seems to be the purest form of sort of power to the people at the end of the day. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Just going back on something you kind of mentioned earlier, but a question that I really wanted to ask is, anarchy is often used as a shorthand for chaos.
Yeah.
Do you think that is just just a shut down debate, or is there any truth in that?
I suppose the term anarchy on its own refers to sort of like a situation where there is no power or control, you know, and you know, it's like a state of disorder, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do think that there is a sense of sort of like propaganda against the at least the anarchist movement, because if you imagine for a second, put yourself in a statist's shoes who really cannot imagine societies functioning without strong power structures, you can imagine, oh God, it'd be fucking mad. It'd be chaos. Yeah. Everybody would be like looting and raping and pillaging and doing all that kind of shit without, you know what I mean? And if it's a lack of imagination, if you ask me.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the way you put it on. You put it across on Monday. I thought was brilliant. It's not all. It's not smashy, Bernie. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I mean there is an element of that, obviously, you know, but there's a lot of history of thought behind it, you know, and philosophy and stuff like that, which goes completely overlooked. Like, and I think that's a shame, because, you know, going back to the whole Overton window, I think for a lot of people, politics has become, you know, very apathetic, very boring. You know, it's not something that you common person gets really engaged with. Do you know what I mean? And I think that is down to it's lacking any real passion. Do you know what I mean? Any real sort of like interest. And if you can sell a political theory to people on the basis of, well, you know, where this is talking about getting common people working together for their common good, like that, to me, could inspire everybody. That could break this apathetic view of politics and the view of it being quite a mundane thing that is reserved to the echelons of parliament. You know what I mean?
So what switched you on to politics? Because I was quite a late starter, and I probably didn't get. Well, I've only been into it for about 5-6 years now, I'd say.
Yeah,
maybe longer, but not on the level I am now. What was your eureka moment? What was the thing that first switched you on?
I'd have to put that down to getting into punk when I was a young'un. So I would when I was maybe about 14 or 15. I started getting into sort of, Green Day and Sex Pistols and that kind of music scene. And luckily, where I grew up in Leeds, there was quite an established punk scene. So growing up through that and having it kind of like a family and stuff like that, really sort of brought a lot of political ideas. But the backdrop to it is quite important as well, because I grew up on quite a working class estate in Leeds and what have you. And with a lot of people from different backgrounds and stuff like that. And I don't like to badmouth my dad and that, because he's a decent person these days. But my granddad was part of like the National Front when in its heyday, and that obviously bled into how he raised my dad, which obviously bled into how he tried to raise me. So given my sort of upbringing and my backdrop, it's like I don't like to say that he tried to be like, vote BNP and what have you, but it was very part of the culture at home. And the experiences I had being, a young working class lad interacting with people from different backgrounds and stuff, that kind of contradicted the politics that I was hearing at home. And kind of along the side of, everybody has that sort of thing when you growing up and you have to, when you're becoming a man and that, and you challenge the kind of authority of your parents, and it's all tied up with that kind of idea, and it kind of polarized my sort of relationship with my dad in a sense, to the point where it made me want to be more. You see where I'm coming from? So I've thought about this as well. Do you know what I mean? I've thought this through and kind of traced my upbringing and my ideological roots and that, and I think that's got a lot to do with it. So it's quite similar, I would say, to myself. I mean, a lot of my family are on the right, and they still are on the right. There's always a copy of The Sun in the house, and it's just face palm. And my mum's a sort of weird person that she'll vote Conservative. She knows it's going to bugger her in the long run, but she'll vote Conservative just because she's sure her next door neighbour
is on the fiddle. Yeah,
Right.
it's just like so as long as I can stitch her up, then it's okay. But you're like, hang on, you got to look at the country as a whole, and that's, she doesn't really think about anything too much further than her home back garden. I'm all right, but I want to stitch her up next door, and it's just like just a quick shout out to hi Captain Swift, Angels, and Cameron and James. Welcome to the
Hello,
chat.
friends.
Yeah. So yeah, it's I suppose a lot of it was when I studied about the Second World War at school. And the Nazis, I just thought were bad people. They were just bad people. And then I learned it was a political movement, and some of those echoes we're still feeling them now.
Oh yeah,
especially with people like Front National in France, and there's even hints of it in things like UKIP and Britain First and stuff.
Of course, yeah.
So, but I'm sure we'll get onto that later when we talk about Antifa, but it's interesting. If you were going to say talk to a young person that's interested in anarchism today, what would you say this is your go-to place to get information? Is there a book or a website?
Yeah, well, there's loads. Like, I get blown away by the amount of literature that is. There's the Anarchist library, which is like a decent, like a library basically, but it's like based on freeware and copyleft and all that kind of good online sort of anti-copyright stuff, and that you can just download. There's hundreds of books written by like so many different authors, and so it is quite overwhelming. But you can Google for the Anarchist FHQ, which is a really good sort of introduction, which sources a lot of these books. And then also there's the Bread Book, which it became a bit of a meme, a left-wing meme online. Is like read the Bread Book, and the Bread Book is a book called The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin, which this was the origins of the anarcho-communist school of thought. So he was, he wrote about this book in like the late sort of like 1800s and what have you. And there's a website, breadbook.org, that really kind of breaks it down and gives you free versions to download and stuff. So the Bread Book. Read the Bread Book.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. So I did just have a question now. Just come back to me. Sorry.
It's all right, buddy.
If you were to see your polar opposite on the political spectrum, where would you say? Would it be the ANCAPs? Would that be your?
No, well, I'm really not keen on ANCAPs, but they are, in terms of philosophy, they are still quite anti-state. They use a lot of anarchist rhetoric to sort of justify why they believe that private capital should be the only, or private property should be the only kind of institutions. They use a lot of anti-state rhetoric, which I completely agree with. But then they go the other way, and but the polar opposite. I suppose you've seen your political compass. You've 4 quadrants, and it's the bottom left is where most sort of anarchist schools of thought. So, and then in your top right, you've got your hardcore fascists. Do you know what I mean? Who are very, very authoritarian, but also very like racist and nationalist and stuff. So that would definitely be the polar opposite. And I guess that's why it's always like anarchists and communists and that are the ones who do the anti-fast stuff. Do you know what I mean? Go on. Sorry.
No. Go on. Carry on.
Well, I just think that because the way that these two ideologies have formed, it's kind of like you can't really have one without the other. Do you know what I mean? They are reactionary to each other. And that sort of creates a situation where, especially nowadays, where the center ground isn't really talking about these ideological differences. So both sides get viewed as sort of like radical fringe positions, but from my perspective, it's kind of like, they're the ones who are talking about ideological differences, and because some fascists are as fucking revolutionary as some left-wingers, you know what I mean? They're talking about a revolution, but talking about like, you know, a white revolution against, you know, the state and stuff like that. And so yeah, they're definitely my polar opposites.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I think a lot of the issues that you're talking about is, you know, the Overton window is just not wide enough at the end of the day. And I think it could go back to what Caps in Switzerland and Angels were talking about yesterday, and you know how we have first past the post. That means, you know, different ideas don't really get the weight that they should do, you know, and that it could be down to first past the post, especially, you know, when you're comparing against all the other places in Europe where they've got a more evolved voting system, I suppose, as it were. So,
well, this is why sometimes it's quite difficult from my perspective to talk about, you know, politics within the realms of parliamentary democracy, because I support like reform in terms of like we should have first past the post. That just, you know, if you're going to have a representative democracy, you should have the best form of representative democracy. And first past the post is something that, you know, would obviously make it a bit fairer, but I think there is better solutions to the problem. Do you know what I mean? And reform can only go so far. And so, you know, one of the mantras is that, you know, you're never going to vote the bourgeoisie are never going to let you vote them out of power. Do you know what I mean? It's going to come to a point where there is, you know, a point where the two ideologies come to a head, and I don't think they will go down without a fight. Honestly, you know,
they never have. You know,
exactly that. History
they say that liberties are never given, they're always taken. So
precisely,
you know,
mate.
have to fight all the way. So moving on then, as you label yourself as an activist, what is anarchic activism actually look like, if you were to describe yourself?
Well, you see, I do believe in a diversity of tactics. Yeah, so you could go from, you know, just general protest marches and pickets and strikes and all of these lovely things, you know, that are quite acceptable forms of protest within the realms of you know, our current democracy. And I completely support that idea, but some people choose a what they call direct action. So this would be sort of doing protests or, you know, actions outside of the law sometimes, you know. So recently a good example was you know, the current sort of situation in Afrin in Syria, and the, you know, the whole YPG and the YPJ. They were supported by the US and all this stuff against ISIS, and in that area they've got an area called Rojava where they've got a form of democratic confederalism, which is based off of ideas written by an anarchist called Murray Bookchin. And this was passed down through a guy called Öcalan, who started, I think it's called the People's, it's like the PKK, People's, I can't remember what they're called, but it's a left-wing force in Syria, basically. And so they've been taking territory back off ISIS in Syria, forming their own lovely little sort of, you know, it's not perfect. It's not like it's a fucking civil war at the end of the day, but there's an area called Afrin, which was sort of being part of this revolution. And the Turkish state now are completely going in there and fucking genociding the shit out of them. Like, it's a really serious situation. And recently a group of activists in Manchester and London climbed onto the rail tracks at Manchester Piccadilly.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Now that is a form of direct action, and you can see how controversial it is. Even just looking at that event, like, you know, I've seen all kinds of comments. It's like, oh yeah, you can protest, but don't fucking inconvenience people's day and all that shit. Do you know what I mean? But then you think these are people, Kurdish people whose families are being fucking bombed. Do you know what I mean? And they're begging the fucking British government to, you know, do something about it. You know what I mean? So I think that kind of activism, in terms of, you know, directly, that can be seen as more effective. Do you know what I mean? But like I say, I believe in a diversity of means, and by no means would I say, you know, oh, them liberals holding the placards, you know, that's ineffective, you fucking worthless bastards, you wet. You know what I mean? I respect that, but I expect a bit of respect back in terms of, like,
sure,
you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Snowden that said that the law is no substitute for morals, you know?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
he's completely right. I mean, he's someone that I think is absolutely brilliant, and to do what he did took some serious balls, you know?
Yeah, man.
And I suppose that you could describe that as a form of direct action, because he saw his government failing, you know?
You know, you can see the results of that, because it had widespread effect. You know, it highlighted a lot of the awful things the US military were doing in the Middle East, and he got absolutely chastised, like called like a, you know, treason and fucking what did they try and say, like he was aiding the enemy and all this kind of fucking crazy shit, like they do that.
He's yeah, that's fine. He's never going to be able to step foot in America again. No, he will need his pardon through the post being, you know, apostled and, you know, signed by the president, him or herself, whoever it is that does it. But it won't be for a long time yet, you know. So
exactly, yeah.
And it's a shame, really. It's a shame.
Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, if you talk about what these democracies that we have, like in America and in here, we talk about liberty and freedom and, you know, all of these kind of things. And what the fuck were he standing up for if it wasn't like liberty and freedom? Do you know what I mean? Like,
exactly right. Yeah.
And what free speech and exchange of information and transparency and all of these things that these fucking Western democracies laud as, like, you know, these virtuous fucking institutions. But when somebody really does it, that, you know, that's a bit inconvenient to the state, it's like, oh, we can't be having that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there is definitely a right way of going about direct action, and there's definitely a wrong way. There was a demonstration by a focus group that shall remain nameless, where they blocked the route to Terminal 4 to Heathrow.
Yeah.
And you may remember, this was a couple of years back now, I think.
I think I know what you're on about now.
Yeah. And now, that kind of direct action at the time I didn't agree with, and I probably still don't, especially when it comes to working people. And, you know, the way the situation is now is, you know, a lot of these people are on their way to go on holidays. They've probably been saving up for a year to go on this holiday, right? And they're trying to get to the airport. Now, Terminal 4 is usually long haul. I've been through there enough times myself. And, you know, if I get stopped by some protester and I end up missing my flight, I'm going to be gutted, because, you know, the thing is, if you get the lowest rung economy ticket and you miss your flight, you're fucked. Right? You've lost that money. Not just when you fly out, but you fly back. And if it's a package holiday and you've got no insurance, which is usually the last thing you're going to get. And if you're counting the pennies anyway. So, you know, that's why I say this is the wrong thing. Now, if they were to block cargo routes, for instance, going in and out of Heathrow Airport, because the cargo has its own terminal, has its own entrance to the airport. Now, that's different. Now, I believe that's a better way to do it.
I would agree with you, mate. Yeah.
Then you're hitting them in the pocket where it hurts, you know?
I completely agree with you, yeah. I think in terms of that, you do have to weigh up, you know, kind of like the effects of actions and stuff like that. And I only speak for myself, basically, but and I do support, because I think that kind of stuff was in response to the fact that they're building another, building another line, building another air thing. What are they called?
Runway. No, it wasn't the runway stuff. It was by another focus group.
Is it to do with the pollution, the air pollution? So along them lines. No, well, even still, I mean, you know, from my perspective, if somebody were doing that kind of action in response to, let's say, you know, the massive amounts of air pollution in London, which is killing people. I would suggest that, and whilst I can understand from, you know, your perspective, and especially somebody who, you know, might be getting low economy tickets and fucked, and, you know, you're massively inconveniencing their day. But at the end of the day, people are dying. And
oh yeah, sure.
So I'm not going to try and justify where I just speak for myself, but a good example was, again, another one in London recently. You know, there's a lot of the homeless problem in this country is getting fucking completely out of hand. There's been, you know, lots of recorded deaths of people who've been rough sleeping. There was a small group that blocked roads outside of Westminster with a big banner saying "No more deaths in our streets." And I think that kind of stuff needs to happen to really highlight the and it inconveniences people, but it makes news. Do you know what I mean? It gets people talking about these issues, and it's like, you being mildly inconvenienced on your way to work or what the fuck ever.
Oh yeah, go for it, man.
Pales in comparison compared to, you know, what homeless people have to deal with. Like, so
I completely agree.
We do have to pick our battles, and I'll be the first to admit sometimes, you know, it's not always justified, but you have to be smart about it. So
yeah, definitely. That's wicked. All right, that's taken about 25 minutes. I think that's good for this part one. What we're going to do is we're going to come back with part two, where we're going to be talking about punching Nazis and Antifa. Well, hey. So my name's been Champ Chigimba, signing off. So if you could like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, all that groovy stuff. And do you want to sign off, old school?
Yeah. Thanks for listening, folks. Old school anarchist signing off. That'll do.
Back in 5.